Most scholars would argue that real history begins not with the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, not with Moses. More conservative scholars would argue that real history begins about the 10th century BCE, the time of King David. Others would argue that actually we can't really talk about real history until a bit later, until about the 8th century BCE. But
so David and Solomon are fictitious figures?
You know, they're maybe like kind of the King Arthur figures, if you like.
One thing about the whole story of David and Solomon is that it is accepted as a lot less historically sound. If you had a kingdom like Solomon's that went from Egypt to the Euphrates, because that's what the Bible says.
With 1,000 wives.
1,000 wives. You would have left some artifacts. And there are no artifacts of that sort from that era. There's not one ivory comb from one of Solomon's wives. Solomon probably lived, but this kind of picture of his glory was to some extent a later kind of nationalistic creation. No scholar, except for very, very conservative fundamentalists, can find anything in the historical record that really relates to Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. The names are actually characteristic of the period, which is the Middle Bronze era, if you want to get technical.
The overwhelming consensus of contemporary biblical scholarship, except for that practice in the most conservative circles, is that the ancestors, the matriarchs and patriarchs, are at best faintly legendary figures. Archaeologists for generations have been searching for evidence in the Sinai Peninsula and in Egypt that would authenticate the biblical account of the Exodus. But no Egyptian inscriptions refer to either the enslavement or the escape.
Three models that have been put forth to explain the appearance of Israel in the highlands of Canaan are conquest, pastoral sedentarization, and social revolt. The first theory, the traditional model of a unified military conquest, is based mainly on an uncritical reading of the book of Joshua. This model has been largely discredited by recent archaeology, even though it remains the dominant view in religious circles.
The progress in archaeological and anthropological research between the 1960s and the 1980s brought about the total demise of the military conquest theory. Excavations at key sites mentioned in the conquest narrative, such as Jericho, Ai, and Arad, showed that they were not inhabited in the late Bronze Age, or were insignificant villages. New finds at Lachish and Afek, and re-evaluation of finds from the older digs at Megiddo and Hatzor, indicated that the collapse of the late Bronze Canaanite city-state system was a long process, which took at least several decades.
Of the 31 sites said in the biblical narratives to have been taken, that is, overrun or conquered by invading Israelites, only 2 or 3 show any sign of destructions at the requisite late Bronze Iron One age transition. Today, not a single mainstream biblical scholar or archaeologist any longer upholds biblical archaeology's conquest model. Not one.